Hello, Thought Roomies. Welcome back to the Thought Room. I am your host, Hallie Rose. For those of you who don't know me, hopefully you've just listened to part 1 of this series. This is part 2 with my friend Eric Morris, who is the CEO of Local 130 Seafood. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, definitely go back and listen to that. You will learn things about the seafood industry that will astonish you. I described this in my intro to that episode, but I was feeling very weird about releasing any of the content I had recorded before the world started to change in the radical way that it has, before COVID, before the death of George Floyd and the cascade of events, including Black Lives Matter protests. And I was worried that some of the information I had recorded wasn't really relevant, and it didn't really feel right at the time to release it. So I sat with that for a very long time. And ultimately what I came to is that I believe that there is a lot of value here in these stories that I've been collecting. And I think on a bigger scale, this is all contributing toward us cultivating more awareness and learning how to understand things that we don't fully understand and haven't maybe examined before. So I decided to ultimately release these episodes. I called up Eric and said, hey, we're going to release your episode. And he felt really passionate about recording a follow-up with me, given that so much had happened. At first, I was in a little bit of resistance to this because if you listen to the show, you know that I record all of my interviews in person. And right now, Eric's in New Jersey and I'm in Texas. And I didn't really want to do an electronic interview. So for the first time ever, I made an exception to my rule. And Eric and I this week recorded an update, which is this part 2 that you're about to hear now. I had no idea where this episode would take us, and it has such a beautiful journey and flow of its own. We dive into how COVID has affected Eric's business. We talk about dealing with chaos, dealing with fear. We dive into systemic racism, and we learn something new about each other in the course of this conversation, which is that both Eric and I have adoptive siblings that are people of color. And we talk about that experience and their experience and what we've learned through having that in our lives. And there are just so many golden nuggets of wisdom in this episode. I really encourage you to listen through the end, and please come find me on Instagram afterward and share your thoughts with me at Thought Room Podcast. If you listen to part 1, then you probably already have an order of Eric's fish on the way to your door. But in case you missed that from the last episode, I'm going to tell you about it again. If you go to Eric's website, local130seafood.com, and his website was named after the 130 miles of New Jersey coastline where Eric is local to. If you go to his website, local130seafood.com, you can browse all of the fresh fish that Eric has available that can be shipped anywhere in the US. It's shipped in these gel packs. It keeps it nice and cold. And it's never frozen, it's fresh, never frozen fish. You're supporting the domestic fishing industry here in the US. You're supporting Eric's small business, and you're also supporting this show. So maybe you want to splurge and do a little sushi night, and you want some great quality fish that you can trace back to its source and you know the story behind it. If that's the case, Eric is definitely your guy for this. So visit local130seafood.com, and you can use the code ThoughtRoom for $15 off your order of $75 or more. If you haven't already signed up to the Thought Room podcast newsletter, I just started sending this out this week for the very first time. I'm so excited. I'm sharing excerpts from my book, my musings, my favorite songs that I have on repeat every week. I'm sharing meditations, and I'm doing announcements about the courses that I have coming up that I'm so excited about. And right now I'm working on a course specifically for men about becoming the embodiment of the conscious masculine. So we're diving into themes of communication, how to speak with women, how to understand the experience of a woman, how to speak the language of energy, and particularly how to translate that into a sexual space, into the bedroom, how to communicate non-verbally. And if you're somebody who's really, whether you're in a relationship or not, this really could be of benefit if you're a woman listening to this with a male partner and you believe that he may benefit of this. Let him know about it. If you're a man listening to this and you want to learn more, you want to deepen your practices, you want to expand your consciousness to become a more conscious male in these times, then this course is definitely for you. You can learn more about that, and you can be the first to hear when it launches by visiting hallierose.com/men. Without further ado, let's step into the thought room for part 2. You're not going to want to miss this with Eric Morris. Eric Morris, welcome to the Thought Room. Welcome back to the Thought Room.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me again.
So I went to begin preparing to release your episode, and we recorded this way back in October. So this is before I went to Soltara, before I had all of my medicine experiences at the center, before you had done a variety of other things, before COVID, before Black Lives Matter protests. And going to release this podcast, I felt pretty strange because there's so much valuable information in here. And at the same time, the landscape of the world had me feeling like, is this all even relevant anymore? You know, what are we doing? And so when I reached out to you, you suggested, hey, let's hop back on. Let's do a little bit of a bonus section. And that's what we're doing here today.
Yes, I did. COVID kind of changed the world for everyone. I think in a lot of different industries, but especially the food industry in particular, food distribution, especially restaurants. I mean, it's going to be a different world. It's going to be that really that place and time that everything changed. And so I definitely wanted to kind of hop back on and tell you about kind of the experiences that, my business, me personally, have had during COVID and what we did to get through it, and then, kind of where we're at now and what the future looks like, because that's a big unknown too. And so the future is definitely going to be different. And so that's why I suggested it.
I'm glad you did. And so why don't we just start, take me back a few months ago, kind of like how things were feeling before all this started to go down. And if you can, like a story, just walk me through your feelings and your experience and how things are shaping up now.
So I've never been so excited for a year before. And like 2020 was going to be the year. I made a huge investment in a refrigerated warehouse. I was like gearing up just to have the biggest year of my career, my life. I was just so in sync with 2020 being the year. And we started the year and it was happening. We were busier than we've ever been. We were growing faster than we've ever been. And we had been seeking outside investment. That looked like it was going to happen. We were on pace to really, the trajectory of the business was doing really well. We were doing a lot of really cool and innovative things with seafood. And March 13th was about the day where that all changed. And our company it was about 15% retail seafood. And then it was about 5% wholesale to other wholesalers, and then 80% direct to restaurants. And so restaurants shut down overnight, and we were left without 80 to 90% of our business. And we were sitting there with, 20 something employees and no vision on the future, really just scared and not really sure, I've never talked about bankruptcy more in my life, but that was a reality of what was happening. But not only that, it was, as we talked about last time, we lend restaurants fish in exchange for credit terms. So they use us as credit houses, essentially. It's just kind of the way that it's always been. It's part of the industry. And we were left with a big number of receivables. And so here we are, we're sitting on a big number of receivables from people that are completely wiped out, right? So if I'm trying to chase a receivable to a restaurant, frankly, I feel bad. I'm an empath. I understand your situation. I'm not trying to shake you down for every little penny to save me, but I also too don't have, a rich uncle behind me that can support me and provide me, substance to carry through. And so, we were left with a lot of questions. And me and my business partner really aren't the type of guys that are just going to sit there and let it all kind of go. And so overnight, the weekend of March 13th, we created a Shopify site just randomly, and we started building an online store. And by Monday morning, we launched an online store, and we started selling direct to consumer. But we also had $30,000 worth of seafood, primarily $30,000 worth of local seafood that would have went to restaurants. And so what did we do? Well, do we try to sell it for pennies on the dollar? Well, no. We ended up calling all the homeless shelters in the area, in the state, and we donated it all. So that week we donated close to 10,000 meals in complete chaos. But what are we going to do? Right? Are we going to try to make 10% back of what we were going to lose, or do we just help some people? And so, I think that fueled with our social media presence, we created this online retail brand that was going direct to consumer that really provided some substance to allow us to kind of carry through as restaurants stay closed. And, week after week and post after post. And we really did a lot of hard work developing a brand. And luckily we sell in a lot of farmers markets. So we have a really good outreach of people that support us locally throughout New Jersey, kind of into New York and Philadelphia. And we were able to build a really nice little sustaining business that allowed us to keep, I'd say, about 12 to 13 people on staff. We were covering our bases. We got awarded a PPP loan finally after a lot of kind of drama. And we were able to kind of inch by inch by inch recover. But we're also not talking about, especially in the beginning of COVID, it was so much fear, fear to look at somebody and get COVID. Right. And we, we're on the front lines. We were delivering food to people's houses, and it was scary for my team. It was, scary for the consumer. How is this fish going to show up? Is it going to be safe? And, we really had to build brand and trust in the brand. And and we had to do it fast. It had to be an overnight pivot. And so we made that pivot, and it turned out to be really, really, really good for the short term. And the seafood industry was really kind of crippled. And it started really when China shut down. We export a lot of seafood to China. And when China shut down, things started to get a little eerie here. Prices started to come down. But then when flights stopped to Europe, well, now you don't have any imports. And if you remember, we import close to 90% of our seafood. So on one end, it was good for the local fishermen because now people are forced to eat from the ecosystem, which is what I've been preaching all along. So yeah, we were positioned pretty good. But we also didn't have any salmon. You didn't have any imported tuna. You didn't have all of these different species that we're importing every day. Not us personally, but the country, because, us as Americans, we eat 4 pieces of fish out of the ocean: shrimp, cod, tuna, and salmon. And a lot of them don't come from here. And so the good news was that we could kind of keep the local fishermen busy because we were in demand of local seafood because it was all we could get our hands on. And that was a really good thing for the industry. So there was a lot of really terrible things that happened, and there was a lot of really good things that happened. The terrible things is that we're going to see a dramatic fall in restaurants restaurants are going to be closing, and not now because they have some support through PPP, but you're going to see a little change in consumer demand, and we are going to see a lot of restaurant closings. And I don't think that it's going to be now. I think it's going to be in December, or it's going to be in November. And if we're hit with another round of COVID, like, it's going to be even bigger. And so, we had to make a real decision as our local restaurants started opening. Well, what do we do? Do we carry more receivables? Do we continue to sell to people that have big back balances? So like the accounting and the finance became, a big question. And, we still are owed hundreds of thousands of dollars from back in February, right? If we're on 30 days, people still haven't paid us from back in February. And so bankruptcy is still a reality, unfortunately. If the people that owe us money, can't pay us, well, we can't continue. And we've been pretty good with our fishermen and our other vendors from around the country, up and down the coast, who have been really gracious to us to extend us some goodwill. But how long does that last? And so for us, the future is really uncertain, and it's really it's a really challenging environment. And I don't know that we'll ever be the same, but we will be different. Especially if it continues, we will be a lot different. So that's my COVID so far story. And
wow.
Yeah.
So at this point, you're still doing the online thing, direct to consumer. Is that mostly how you're pivoting from this?
Yeah. So we made the pivot, and that was really good. And we developed a good brand, and that's still a really big part of our business, but it's also starting to fall off. And it's starting to fall off because people are craving social interaction. New Jersey and New York and Philadelphia, like, we got hit really hard, and we've been stuck inside for 3 months, and people want to get out and they want to eat at restaurants and they want to go back to normal. And so now we're seeing it trend the other way, where now the restaurants are opening and expecting kind of the business as usual, but like, hey man, like, we were left sitting here with our pants down in the wind, like, hoping that you guys paid us. It can't work like that anymore. Like, it's not the same. It's a new normal. Especially with credit terms, and we have to just change how the entire business and how we do things. No longer bringing in certain species, no longer, taking long distribution drives. We have to really be particular with who we work with, and trust that, if I'm extending somebody credit, I'm putting myself at risk every time I do that. And it has to be a big trust and a really good partnership between us and the restaurant. And we've developed that with the fishermen. And so, we're kind of looking to create the supply chain, the trust throughout the supply chain. Everybody talks about the restaurants, who are kind of victimized in this whole thing. Like, absolutely, they were absolutely crushed, right? But what about the people that serviced all the restaurants? What about the people that made their livelihood on the restaurants, right? We were the ones kind of not in the limelight, but trying to still pick up the pieces. And it's been a challenge.
You talk about the possibility of a whole bunch of restaurants closing down. And can you speak more to what you anticipate or intuit the outcome of all of that will be, not just for yourself and others in service to these restaurants, but also maybe for the average individual? Like, what does this look like as far as supply and demand?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's going to change. And we're really seeing, we're seeing good entrepreneurs and bad entrepreneurs, especially on the small business side. Some restaurant owners have been spectacular. They've been communicative. They've, reached out every day, letting us know where they stand. Here's how we're going to operate. And some haven't been so great, who retreat and aren't, show up as good leaders. And you can kind of tell which restaurants are going to make it and which restaurants aren't. I think that we're probably going to see 50% across the board go down. I think we're going to see a lot of big restaurant chains it happen to first, and then you'll see your mom and pops really start to struggle. I think the people that really pivoted their businesses, especially in the Northeast where we were really really hit, that did other businesses. A lot of them did grocery, a lot of them did takeout, delivery. They were able to survive, right? But the restaurants that just shut their doors and then didn't open again and now are running on PPP, well, they're going to be backloaded with debt. And I don't envision them surviving. But the beauty of it is that the restaurants that do survive are going to be faced with less competition. So they'll thrive. So I believe in 2 years, the restaurants that, have really had the grit to make it through are going to survive. And if there's like one really good thing to come out of this, it's the fact that we really had to eat local, like more than ever, right? We had to support local farmers. We had to support fishermen. We had to support, people in the fields picking produce, because that's all we had. And it's something in this country that we need to get back to. It's eating organic. It's eating local. It's eating from our ecosystem, both land and sea. And I really believe that is something that will change and really needs to. So yeah, I think that is a really good thing that came out of it. But I do see restaurants across the board a 50% drop off. I would estimate.
That's so interesting. Just thinking about this whole year so far, it really does feel like a series of events that are unapologetically coming to the forefront and saying, look at me and fix me and change me. And how many things have a variety of groups been advocating for a long time, waving in front of people's faces, like Black Lives Matter and like things like sustainability for our oceans. And a lot of people are like, oh yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing that we need to fix, but like not doing anything. So it really is this intense sort of global pause. And I think, at least I'll just speak from my personal experience, it's been the discomfort of having the mirror like held up in front of you and saying like, this is who you are. This is what your choices are. This is what you've chosen. And are you comfortable to stare at that image? And for a lot of us, it's really uncomfortable to look at ourselves that closely, for some, for the very first time. I know there are things that I've changed in the last couple of months that I'm ashamed I didn't change before. I didn't care more about before. And I've just been paying attention to everything, paying attention to how my body feels, paying attention to my boundaries around certain relationships, around how I feel when I leave certain communications, around how I am or am not appropriately advocating for certain groups or for certain changes, or am I being an active voter? And when you are in the middle of an experience, that kind of feels like, if you're anything like me and you're pretty hard on yourself, you're just like, I'm literally doing everything wrong. It can be, I mean, that's kind of a melodramatic response, but the brain will do that, right? The brain will be like, look at everything you have to fix. And what's the result of that is just utter overwhelm. So I think what a lot of people experience, at least at the initial stages of COVID, and then again with the Black Lives Matter coming to the forefront, is just like this overwhelm to the point of shutdown and like freeze. Like, I don't know what to do. This is all super intense. But in a way, like you're saying, I think the beautiful thing is that we, not just in the restaurant industry, but in every industry, in every pocket of politics, in every facet of these systems that we created, we're being forced to, again, stare ourselves in the mirror and bear witness to the awakening of our own consciousness, both individually and as a collective.
I'm 100% in agreement with you. You're like, you have no idea. Even my brain, having pivoted, changed, kept the business alive, we're struggling because of something out of our control, but I still put it on myself for the reason that we're struggling because I didn't do enough. Right. And then it brings up old things of I'm not enough. And you're like, wait. You did a lot and you really made an awesome move. And hey, ego, shut up, because you are on the right path and you need to follow your path and you need to. And so I totally agree with you. And I have changed a lot of things, and a lot of and a lot of things for me have come to the surface, and just especially how I handle chaos, really. I mean, I would say that those first couple of weeks were chaos, and I was pretty proud of myself and my team on how we did, in those first few months. And that was that's a really good thing for us and for the future. But I mean, yeah, I'm in 100% agreement with shaping new paths because of this. But this is also a level to raise the collective consciousness, right? How beautiful was it to see Venice, Italy, and you could see down the canals and that it was all clean and beautiful, or no smog in LA, or all these things. Can we rally around the earth like we do a disease or a virus? And it brings it all to light. I mean, we're catching fish that we haven't seen before. There are more fish. They're so abundant because we really had to stop fishing for a little while, and so we're seeing it on food or on seafood too. And it's just, yeah, it's a beautiful thing to see because we need it. It was time.
Yeah, and I think it's breaking down the boundaries around what we thought was possible. I've said this before in conversations, but if I had told you airports were mostly going to close down, schools were going to close down, restaurants were going to close down, and everybody was going to stay in their home for months, and I told somebody that last year, they would be like, "You're crazy. That's never going to happen. The world's never going to shut down. You're never going to get everybody to do that. Never. And look what happened. This absolutely shattered our beliefs around just one single thing. And so in that, it's like we were almost shocked. We were blindsided. We were living in a bubble that just got popped. And then suddenly every rule that ever was wait a minute, is that true? Are all the laws by which I'm abiding, are those really laws, or are they just who made them? And why do I agree to everything? And what have I been taught in my education system? And at least that's the way it was for me. There was this sudden existential cascade of looking at everything that I thought could not be obliterated that was now up for obliteration and subsequent, recreation.
Yeah. It also elevated the power of choice, right? To really choose what's important, to choose whether you want to risk leaving, to choose your safety, to choose who you believe to listen to choose if you believe the fear, to choose, and so I think the power of choice was even elevated so much more. And it really kind of changed the way I think. I choose not to listen, not to fall in line, not to do these things, and a lot of my, my competitors kind of chose to listen. I chose to ignore in a lot of things.
The other thing about choice is it causes you to be accountable for your actions. And there are perhaps some individuals who have been quite comfortable to follow their lives, all the way through. They maybe prefer to be told what to do. They want other people to give me the information and I'll just go with that because they know and they're the experts. What this is doing, again, it's that uncomfortable mirror we're holding up in front of ourselves, and suddenly we're forced to look at wait, have I been just like a cow in the pasture, just been chewing on the fodder that's been handed to me? And it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to consider that, at least just to consider it. Not saying you have to accept it, but it's wait a minute. Now I feel like an idiot.
Like
around.
a sheep.
Yeah, like a sheep. A sheep is even better, than a cow. That's very accurate. So nobody wants to be a sheep. Everyone's ego. I'll speak for myself. My ego does not want to believe that it was just willy-nilly believing everything that was told to me for the first 30 years of my life. It's like, I want to believe that I was always making informed and educated decisions. And in many ways, perhaps I was, but now the veils around a lot of things are being lifted, and things now that I'm being discerning about, I'm operating on a different level. I feel like I always tried to be logical in my discernment. Now my logic is moving away from my mind space, and the thing that I'm really trusting is the compass of my heart. Because that's the only thing that I can say for sure is truth within me, is how I feel a visceral reaction to something or someone in an expansive way or a contracting sort of way. So this whole period for me has been about sharpening my intuition and trusting that.
Heck yeah. And not buying into the fear. Right. I mean, this was just a lot of this in a lot of ways was fear mongering and divisiveness and like just choosing not to listen, not to tune in. But also what we're not talking about is mental health, and what mental health is, for me, like I've always struggled with mental health and, to listen to, if I'm listening to either media source, right, I'm getting depressed during this all. Like I'm thinking the worst. And so, from my experience, I had to balance like optimism and hope with fear and choosing not to listen. And that was a really big struggle for me internally. It really provided me with a daily battle, a daily mental health battle of like, what am I going to wake up and choose to believe this morning? Am I going to be afraid? Am I going to not show up as the fullest version of myself? Am I, and make those decisions every single morning to maximize positive mental health, because, as entrepreneurs, we're leaders and we have to step up for not only our staff, but, the people that we're servicing, our communities. And it was hard to show up in positivity and light every day. And, and it still is, and let's like, with the movement that was going on, behind George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, I mean, that was another struggle right behind it. And to show up, positive in that, it was so hard, especially seeing, what poor leadership, we have. So it's been mental health wise, it's been a really, really tough road. But also, I'm definitely seeing the good in all that's happened. Like this happened for us, not to us. And, if we can keep that attitude, then we can really take from this. And I view that in business as well. I mean, if we go bankrupt, it was because of stuff out of our control, and it happened for us, and other opportunities will present themselves. It's not something that I want. It's not something that I've really thought about, but it's a reality, and it's, I'm okay with it all at this point.
I am really glad that you brought up the mental health piece, because I think it's been really strange to show up at this time and want to do it appropriately, want to not stay silent, especially if you're somebody with a platform. It's like, how do we speak out? Also, how do I not speak out in a reactionary way? Like, how do I make sure it's coming from a grounded space and I've actually processed through the emotions to the point that I've synthesized it to say something helpful and useful, and I'm not just creating more noise and chaos and confusion in the space, or I'm not just saying something to be performative so that people know, oh, okay, like I wouldn't want people to think that I don't care about Black lives, so I better say something. And again, that's actually still acting out of a place of ego and fear and not real change. So although maybe it's counterintuitive, I really chose to, at least for the first little while, just like listen and take it all in and feel the feelings, hold up that mirror, so to speak, of like, okay, how have I actually been showing up for this issue in my life? How do I desire to show up for it in the future? And focusing on that and pivoting into action from a place of just like rooted awareness, and also recognizing that we all have our gifts. So at first I got really confused. I was like, okay, like everybody should be doing this, or everybody should be going to the protests, and like everybody should be. And then I went, well, like, hold up though. Like, Hallie, where are you best of service? What are your gifts? Okay, your voice, great. So then how are you going to use your voice? And how are you going to get yourself to a place of being grounded enough to speak about this so that you're actually helpfully using your voice? So it's a multi-layered process, I think, for everybody. And I think I would love to see us all extending as much compassion to each other as possible in this process of finding our way of how to show up as the best human beings. Because if we're not finding compassion underneath all of our passion, we're just adding to more separation. We're adding to more fear, to more hatred, to more othering of each other, instead of bringing each other in close. And I think there's still a way that we can invite and incite growth and gentle invitation and education in each other without shaming, separation, and fear.
Hell yeah. I want to do like one of these. That was amazing. I couldn't agree more. It also provided a really good lens too. A lens into the hate, a lens into, things that have just gone and been swept under the rug for so long. Like they're all coming to the surface now, and we're seeing people for their true colors and who they are. And that's what we've always needed, right? We're seeing leaders show up. We're seeing leaders retreat. We're seeing, just people who true colors that, racism is coming out and all these amazing things that like, it's time, it's time to move forward. It's time to be one race, one unity, be together in unicity. And if you've had plant medicine journeys, that we are all connected to this one source and this one energy. And it feels like there's some change happening in the world that is really putting us together. And I hope so. And I think that through the divisiveness, we will all connect as one, and I think that the voice is being heard overwhelmingly, especially in this country, what we're dealing with. And it was also beautiful to see the protest go international, right? Because it's such a worldly thing. And like American culture is so important throughout the world that it really spread, to see it in New Zealand and Australia and London. Like it's a beautiful thing, and we need to get back to one race, the human race, and it's time. So it's a beautiful thing to do, but we're also a lot of people are going to be exposed, and that's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. When you talk about one race, I mean, this is really fascinating and interesting. And I've been watching some videos by Jane Elliott. I don't know if you know who she is, but she's just OG advocate for Black Lives Matters. And there's all these like retro videos of her from, I don't know, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, her just like advocating. And, she talks about how we all came from Black women, and then we just started to move around the globe. And as our people moved north, our melanin changed. The pigment of our skin changed because we were getting different amounts of sun. We were eating different food. And a lot of people don't realize how much the food that you eat actually affects something like your skin, which is the largest organ in your body. Like you've heard, if someone eats a lot of carrots, how their skin will actually start to turn orange. This is science. So why wouldn't we believe that over sustained periods of time, something like this could happen? We talk about, Christopher Columbus discovering the United States. He didn't discover the United States. There were other people here that he just pushed out. You know what I mean? So, or we enslaved. And is it uncomfortable to face the fact that our American history taught us a lot of things to paint us as the heroes in the hero's journey of the story of humanity and put white men center stage? Like all of the greatest scientific discoveries by men, white men. This is, white men. And is that true? Like, did nobody else in history of a different skin color or gender do significant things? No, clearly not. But these are the stories that are being centralized. And it's embarrassing now for us to all be like, oh, I was asleep to this a little bit. And, so I just want to go back to the idea of one race, because I think this ties into the triggering and contraction and the spiritual bypassing sometimes felt around that phrase, all lives matter. And I think that it's important. Like, I've seen a lot of the memes saying like, that, like likening, I think I saw one that was like, one house is on fire and then the other neighbor's house is not on fire. And the person whose house is on fire is like, the fire on my house matters. Call 911 or call the fire station. And the person's like, well, but my house matters too. All houses matter. Yeah, exactly. And they're like, yeah, but your house isn't on fire. Like, of course your house matters, but your house isn't on fire. And I think that as a white person, to just consider, like, relax into the discomfort that anyone might feel around being told, if this is the case for someone, that you feel the response to want to say all lives matter to the phrase Black Lives Matter, to just be like, oh, I'm turning this a little bit personal. Like, I am making an assumption that if someone's saying these lives matter, that my life doesn't matter just as much. And that's where the discrepancy is. Like, I don't believe that's what's being said. It's saying that if you have privilege and resource, wouldn't you want to live in a world where we're all equal? And if you don't, then that's something for you to sit with. That's an uncomfortable thought. Like, oh, shoot, I was living in a world that gave me a bunch of privilege. Subconsciously, I probably liked it and benefited from it in a lot of ways. And now when I'm being faced with the opportunity to make it more equal, there's a part of the psyche deep inside that feels threatened. That's an astonishingly ugly thing for some people to face. But the thing that I would like to bring in, and I talked about this, I think I talked about this on one of my IG lives. I started doing this series, Thought Room Thursdays, where I just answer listener questions rather, every Thursday. And I brought in this metaphor. I think I had seen it in another meme, which was like one child with a candle lighting another child's candle. And the caption was like, when one flame lights another, nothing is lost. Light is only gained. And this is where this reframe is critical. Because when we redistribute wealth, when we make equality possible across the board, the people who have the privilege now need to understand that you're not losing anything. In fact, we're gaining everything when we can create a world where we can all step up equally with the richness that we have to offer from the truth of who we are.
For sure. I don't actually know if you know this about me, but my family is a little different as far as my parents had adopted kids from around the world. And so we were all different colors growing up. And, when it was first evident as a little child that like your brother is indigenous from El Salvador and is extremely dark, right? And your sister is like light-skinned Colombian and your other sister is Asian from the Philippines. Like, well, why is that? You know, and it was always preached to us is that like, we're all humans, we're all one race, love everybody equally. Like they're your brother and sister, no matter what. And we were faced to, you know, a lot of racism, you know, like, oh, this is my brother, Corey. No, he's not, you know, well, yeah, he is. And like, he's been with us since he was 4 weeks old, and he's my brother as much as anyone else is. And so it was actually really beautiful to see this rise in this change in the world, and to see it be brought into the light, because it was something that I've always been in my heart grown up with. And like, but I've also been forced to look at areas of my life where like I have had prejudice. I have, you know, had behaviors that weren't what I ideally wanted for my, you know, inner self. And that's been amazing to reflect and to sit into that. But, you know, for me, like my family has been so open to one race. So when you go back to, you said Jane Austen?
Elliot.
Jane Elliott, like, hell yeah, we are all one race. We are the human race, and love everybody equally because we all have so much to give. And so that was always ingrained into us growing up in a multicultural, you know, I call it like new modern American family.
This is interesting about you. I didn't know that about the adoption. And just to share about my own family is that I have two sisters who were adopted from Ethiopia, both special needs. And they've been with us since one was, 4 weeks old and the other was 2 years old. And to see them navigate growing up in small town, government town in Canada, primarily all white people. I mean, they might be the only Black kids at their school. And things that I was completely blind to as a white person being reflected through their eyes and their pain. Something as subtle as my younger sister, she just turned 13, but you know, she's a little bit cognitively probably the level of like a 6 or 7 year old in many ways. And, you know, she'll come up to me and she'll start touching my hair. She'll say, "Oh, your hair is so beautiful. I wish I had your hair." And of course, what's the natural response for me to go, "Oh, your hair is so beautiful. And you know, your hair is unique, and my hair is unique," and all of this. But to just see her with her limited cognitive ability, just like not computing it and just consistently reiterating that like my hair is better, that's come through the programming of a world that's not built for her. That's coming from not seeing dollies that look like her and not seeing people that look like her on TV, especially not in the main characters, right? They're like the token Black friend on the show, and, you know, or they're like the supporting best friend. And it's like, it's upsetting. It's upsetting to see that. And I remember even, so how old was I? I would have been 17, 18 when we adopted them. And I remember she was a baby, and I would go to the grocery store with my mom, who's her mom, and my mom's other white kids, and then this little Black baby, and people thought she was mine. They assumed that I had just probably gotten pregnant young with a Black man, and this was my mistake. And I remember I used to get so angry and ashamed that was the reaction, because people, like the grocery store checkout clerk would be like, "Oh, okay, these must be your kids and this is your grandkid." And my mom's like, "No, these are my kids." And my mom would just be like, "No, absolutely not." But I just remember that people don't think they're being racist, but I mean, we completely are.
100%. You know, and for my brother, like he would always get pulled over. Well, why is he getting pulled over in the same car that I drove, but I never got pulled over?
Right.
But as soon as we gave it to him, he was getting profiled all the time, you know? And even at his job, I mean, you know, he's you know, made it to management, and the new owner of this business came and said, "I don't like the color of my management team." to another member, and he overheard it. And like he has to deal with all that, and it's it's tragic, and I hate it. It makes my stomach turn, because it's time to change from the top to the bottom, and it's time to live as one. And it's just everything that you're saying, I'm just in total agreement on. I keep going back to the science and white men, and it just drives me nuts. But where we don't see it is art, because there's beautiful art throughout all scopes. African art, Asian art, like it's everywhere. And that's, I tend to go back to art when I have these feelings. Why can't we make science like art? Why can't we make everything else like art?
Ooh, you know what? And correct me if you don't agree, but I love this because I'm thinking like, where does the art, the art, see that little slip I made? Where does the art come from? It's the heart, or it's that flow space that we get into that is beyond mind. And so I believe that the paradigm shift that we are in now is one from moving to operating from mind space. And I'm not demonizing the mind. I'm not saying the logical mind doesn't have a space or a lot of value in progressing us in a lot of ways, but we have to stop operating from this place of thinking that everything is limited. We have a limited amount of resource. We have a limited amount of people who can be on top. We have to move into this possibility that there is an infinite world beyond what our faculties, our mental faculties can capitulate. Like it is beyond even the simple example. We never thought all of us would be staying home goes to show how finicky this little mind instrument is and how it decides that one thing is true. And there's so much more beyond. So I think the more that we can consciously operate, like as you've been doing in your business, is like from compassion and realizing we're going to have to give passes for certain things. We're going to have to be first and foremost human. We're going to have to tap into that intuition and say, okay, well, logically I could try and like you make a bunch of money off of this and like people's fear in this situation, or you can go back to that heart compass and do what feels right and natural and good. And just think about if everybody started acting out of that heart space rather than consistently the mind space and the reptilian brain and am I being threatened, then our whole world would become art of our hearts.
Absolutely.
I love the snaps. I feel like Matt, your poetry jam.
Yeah, you're on fire today. I love it. And that's what we're going to see, because that's the only thing that will bring us out of this. It's the only thing that will kind of rise up is compassion. And I think that we're seeing it in a lot of areas. We're seeing a lot of industries, and we're seeing the opposite in a lot of ways. And that's all going to go away because it's going to be forced to, because the overwhelming majority of us are that compassion. You have to see the good out of this movement and the love that's coming out of this movement, and take it for what it is, and really like love the human race, because we are going to get through it. We are going to persevere. We are going to be better at the end. And it just has to happen. And there was going to be a time for this. And 2020 wasn't my year, so to say, but it was a pretty good damn year for change. And if the world changed, then like good for the world. I'll take it. I'll take that as a win. It happened for us. And so, I keep like looking back to those memes of like 2020 hit me like this, and it just shows like a car exploding.
Yes, I saw this one that was just like a knight with his whole armored helmet on. It was like me preparing for 2020. And so he has his helmet on. And then the next part is 2020. And the arrow goes right through the tiny eye slit. Like the only part that's not protected. Yeah, so funny.
Yeah. But again, like if the world changed, then it was the best year that we've ever experienced.
Right. It's just like, it's all the perception. Like 2020, you just said, oh, maybe not a great year for me personally, but a great year for change. A great year for change.
That's it. And it has to get better, but there also has to change. and we're definitely seeing it. But we need to see a lot more of it, a lot more of it.
Amazing. I feel like that's a great place for us to end today. This was really powerful. I'm so glad that we did this follow-up. And on the note of you can give your handles again at the end of this one, and maybe your updated website for how people can help support your business.
Yeah, awesome. So you can find me at Eat Local Fish on Instagram. My business is Local 130 Seafood out of New Jersey, and my website is local130seafood.com. We also have an online store where we'll be opening a box program throughout the country, primarily kind of focusing on sushi and sushi grade tuna. So we'll have a sushi box that's going to be going live in the next couple of weeks that will go nationwide. So you can have like amazing sushi with like dope soy sauce and sushi trays and chopsticks. All you got to do is cut it right to your door for dinner. So it's going to be pretty sweet. You got to make the rice. We just provide the fish. Yeah, those are the areas to reach out to me. And yeah, this was really awesome. I didn't expect it to go the direction, but I'm super excited that it went the direction. And you got really deep there, and I can't wait to re-listen and snap again.
Thank you so much, Eric. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening today, and thank you for choosing to spend your time here with me. Part of the shift I'm going through personally is one of trying to pay more attention, looking at how I'm showing up in the world. How am I breathing? How am I sleeping? How am I swiping? What am I eating? What am I supporting? Asking ourselves these questions is the first step, and doing something actionable is the second. If you want to support Eric's business and simultaneously support this show because you value the work that is being done here, please consider visiting local130seafood.com, and you can order some of Eric's amazing fish using the code ThoughtRoom at checkout for $15 off. You can also support this show by tapping 5 stars on Apple and leaving just a line or two of your thoughts. This helps us establish the show and land highly sought after guests. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that these small gestures don't get noticed, or that we don't need to do something about what we care about because someone else is probably doing it. This is the time to challenge all that. This is the time to move into creating the world that we believe in, the world that we think can exist through actively applying our action and our dollars. So if you like something, instead of just thinking it, really show support of it. If you want to change something, be active in that change.